So I know we're doing this a little bit out of order, and we have already completed the line unit. We're going to revisit the line unit, and we're going to talk about something called standard form. So I am going to ask you to try and remember the things that we learned before. First of all, does this formula look, does that seem like something you've learned familiar? Yeah, does it seem familiar? Do you remember we used to use this formula to calculate the slope when given 2 points? So I've written it down there. Does this seem familiar to you? Y is equal to mx plus b? Yeah, so that's something we learned again for the line unit. M stands for slope and B stands for the y-intercept. So those are two things that we got really, really good at. We wrote our test for it. We thought we were done, but it's back. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to learn something called standard form. And standard form is basically taking y is equal to mx plus b and just changing the order and writing it in a different way. So there isn't really a lot of math involved in it. It's more rearranging. Let me explain what standard form is, first of all. Standard form is always written in the form of x plus y plus constant is equal to 0. So the letters A, B, and C stand for any numbers in the world. So you could be like 5x plus 6y plus 7 is equal to 0. But what's really important is these three rules. A always has to be positive. So if your A value is a negative number, you have to change it, rearrange it, do whatever you need to do to make A a positive number. Rule number 2 is A, B, and C cannot be fractions or decimals. So if they are fractions, then what you need to do is you need to multiply by a magic number to get rid of the fractions. And rule number 3 is the equation has to be in the order above. So you can't have the y first and then the x. You can't have the constant on the other side. It has to be in this order. So like I said, no real calculations. We're just going to practice putting equations into the specific form of ax plus by plus c is equal to 0. Two things before we start practice questions. From this form, you know how when something's in y is equal to mx plus b, you can figure out the slope really easily just by reading what's in front of the x, and you can figure out the y-intercept easily just by reading that number. Well, what about when something's in standard form? How do we figure out the slope and the y-intercept? There are two formulas that you're going to have to memorize, and they're going to be really helpful in grade 10 as well, so it's good for you to memorize them now. To figure out the slope, which is m, we're going to go negative the value for A divided by whatever the value for B is. And we'll practice doing that a little bit. And then to figure out the y-intercept, the equation is B is equal to negative C over B. Right now, this is probably all very confusing, but like I said, once we get into practice questions, it'll make a lot of sense. So let's try question number 1. It says, we can prove the above rules by solving the standard form equation for y. I'm going to actually skip that. I don't want to do that right now. It's kind of confusing. Let's go on to question number 2. Question number 2 says, find the slope and the y-intercept of 3x plus 4y minus 8 is equal to 0. The first thing we need to do is we need to figure out if this formula is in standard form. So let's go over the 3 rules. By the way, our A value, let me write this again. So 3x plus 4y minus 8 is equal to 0. This is our A value, just the number 3, not the x. This is our B value, the number positive 4. And this is our C value, the number negative 8. Let's do a little checklist here. Is our A value positive? Yes, it is. So I'll just make a little check mark. That means rule number 1 is correct, or it's true. Is A, B, and C, are they fractions or decimals? No, they're all whole numbers, which is perfect. That means rule number 2 is good as well. And then rule number 3 is the equation has to be in the order where you have the x first, and then the y, and then the constant is equal to 0. So is it in the correct order? Yes. That means this equation is in standard form because all the 3 rules are still true for it. Okay. Now, in order for us to figure out the slope, we're going to use the little equation that we have above. So we're going to say m is equal to negative a over b. That's the formula. Negative times a is going to give me negative 3. Everyone see how I got negative 3? And then what's our value for b? Just a 4. So that means the slope in this question is -3/4. And that's it. That's literally all you have to do to figure out the slope. Exactly. Once you know something's in standard form, you just use the formula -a/b. Okay, how about if we're trying to figure out the y-intercept? So remember our formula is b is equal to -c/b. Okay, we got to be careful here. We have a negative sign that's part of the formula, but what's our value for c? -8. Right? So there are two negatives here. The negative that's part of the formula, and then our c value is the entire thing there, so it's a -8. So we would say -8 over, and our b value is just a 4. So what's this going to reduce to? Yeah, 8/4, which is just a whole number 2. And another way to write this is you can write it as a point, which is the y-intercept x is equal to 0. So it's just going to be 0, 2. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Let's go on to the next page. I want to do a couple of questions from handout H. Okay, so let's try question number 1 on handout H. It says, which equations are in standard form? If an equation is not in standard form, write the letter indicating which of the conditions is not being met. So we're going to write either A, B, and C for whatever rule is not being met. Okay, so question number 1, is that in standard form? No. Which condition is not being met? Yeah, so see how it's breaking rule letter A? I'm just going to put the letter A there to tell me that it's not in standard form. It is breaking rule A. How about question B? Is question B in standard form? No. What rule is it breaking? C, because it's not in the correct order. You can't have y before x. The x has to be before y. Okay, how about question C? Is question C in standard form? No. What rule is being broken? You can't have a fraction, exactly. Okay, be really careful of question D. Is question D in standard form? Yes, because I didn't tell you a really important other rule, which is you don't need all 3 of those to be present in order for it to be standard form. You can have like a y missing, you can have an x missing, you can have the constant missing. Even if one of the 3 parts is missing, it can still be in standard form. So if you take a look at question is question. So let's go back here. Yeah, so for question F, what change would we have to make it into standard form? Exactly. If you move the constant to the other side, then it would be in standard form. All right, G. Nope, because it's breaking rule C. You can't have a y before an x. And then how about question H? It is good because look, A is positive, 3 is a positive number, no fractions or decimals, and it's in the correct order. X, Y, and just the constant isn't there, so you're allowed to have that. H is good. All right, question number 2. For question number 2, it says, which of the following equations are already in slope-intercept form? Remember, slope-intercept form is y is equal to mx plus b. If an equation is not in slope-intercept form, correct it, and then state the slope in the y-intercept for each equation. What is the purpose of this question? Well, I don't want you to forget y is equal to mx plus b. So now we're gonna not talk about standard form. We're gonna talk about y is equal to mx plus b form, and then we're gonna try and see if we can identify it and also figure out the slope and the y-intercepts. All right, so let's go ahead and try, maybe, actually we can do this together. Question A, is it in slope-intercept form? Yeah, what's the slope? And the y-intercept is? Good. Question B, is that in slope-intercept form? Yeah, because remember, y is equal to mx plus b is not so picky. You can have fractions, you can have decimals, you can have negative numbers. As long as the y is by itself and everything else is on the other side, it's fine. So the slope here is -1/4, and the y-intercept is -8. How about question C? No, we need to actually change the order. So we should write it as y is equal to -6x plus 4. And now, once we've written it in this form, we can figure out, oh crap, sorry. We can figure out that the slope is -6 and the y-intercept is +4. Question D is not in y is equal to mx plus b form. What do we have to do? Yeah, so we're gonna have to actually multiply everything here with a -1, and then that way y is gonna become positive. So it's gonna be y is equal to, good job, -2/3x plus 2/5. And then from here, we can see our slope is -2/3 and our y-intercept is 2/5. Yeah. No, not right now. Question E and F are definitely not in y is equal to mx plus b form. I'll pause here, take a second, change them into y is equal to mx plus b, and then we'll compare our answers. So I converted questions E and F into y is equal to mx plus b form, and they look like that. Question G seems kind of tricky, but really it is in y is equal to mx plus b form. It's just the slope is -a/b and the y-intercept is p. I want to do 2 more questions with you, and then I will stop and you guys can work on your own. If you take a look at question 3, what we're going to do is we're going to try to change each of those questions into standard form. So I wanted to try question F with you guys because I feel like that is a little bit tricky. So let's go ahead and try and figure out what question F would be in standard form. We have -1/3x plus y is equal to 2/5. In its current form, this is breaking all sorts of rules because look, it has a bunch of fractions. It has a as a negative number, and it's not in the correct form. It's breaking every rule that you can possibly have. So what do you, there are multiple different ways we could try this. What do you think our first step should be to solve this question? What do you guys want to do? Let's put it in the right order. In order to put it in the right order, we just have to move the constant to the other side. So we're going to go -1/3x plus y minus, I need to move this all over a little bit. So -1/3x plus y minus 2/5 is equal to 0. Good. What's the next step we should do? We have fractions. Yeah, we have fractions, but because this is an equation, we are allowed to multiply this by a magic number. So think back to when we did equations. What would be a good magic number in this case? Good. We're going to multiply everything in this term by 15. Or sorry, everything in this equation by 15. Okay, so when we do that, we're going to get yeah, that would be another good thing. Often people don't see that, but if you want to do 2 steps in one, if you multiply everything by -15, you can actually get rid of the negative sign as well. I'm glad you noticed that. So negative times negative is positive. 15 times 1/3 is just going to be 5x. Negative 15 times y is going to be negative 15y. A negative times a negative is positive, and then we have 15 times 2, which is 30. 30 divided by 5, which is 6, is equal to 0. And now this is in standard form because look, the number 5 is positive. It's in the correct order, x, y constant. There are no fractions or decimals, so we have successfully changed it into the right order. Okay, last question that we're going to do together. This was 3F, by the way. I want to do question 4 with you as well, 4E. So for question 4E, it says, rewrite each equation in slope-intercept form, which is just y is equal to mx plus b. So I think this is good practice for us to try. And E is definitely the hardest question, so let's try that one. Okay, so we have 1 over 4x minus 2y plus 1 is equal to 0. So remember, for slope-intercept form, you want the y to be on one side, and you want to throw everything else over to the other side. So we're going to have negative 2y on the left-hand side. I'm going to move 1 over 4x to the other side. It's going to become negative 1 over 4x. I'm going to move positive 1 to the other side. It's going to become negative 1. And then what do I have to do to get rid of the negative 2? Yeah, I got to divide every single one of these by negative 2. Another way to have done this question is you could have used the magic number right in the beginning and gotten rid of the fraction and then done everything. I think maybe that would have been a little bit easier, but that's okay. Now we're committed to this. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is just y. Let's try to figure out what negative 1 over 4 divided by negative 2 is. So we're going to take the reciprocal. It's going to be times 1 over negative 2. And we end up getting a number of just 1 over 8. So this would be 1 over 8x. And negative 1 divided by negative 2 would just be positive 1 over 2. And then that would be your final answer. Does this make sense, you guys? I don't consider this like actual calculations or anything because really all we're doing is we're changing the order. So let me tell you what your homework is going to be now. We have done question in our final answer is 1 over 8x plus 1/2. So we've already done question number 1. We've done question number 2. You are going to be doing question 3, A, B, C, D, E, because we didn't do those. You're going to do question 4. You will do question 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. So everything on the other page. You're going to notice that there isn't a lot of room on this page. You probably need a lined piece of paper to do your calculations. And all the answers are at the bottom of the page, so you can double check your work as you work through the sheet.